here in San Francisco, as you discussed earlier, by March, for the June 2018 election. The purpose of the measure would be to raise the bridge tolls and create revenues for capital projects primarily, but some operating funds for regional transportation projects that alleviate congestion. So those of you who are familiar with the earlier regional measures 1 and 2 may recall that these were also voter-approved measures. As you know today, when you go across the Bay Bridge, it's about $4 to $6 depending on time of day, about $5 to cross the bridge. The first dollar was actually for bridge maintenance. The second dollar, there was a seismic surcharge as well. That was the second dollar in 1997. Third dollar was Regional Measure 2. It was voter approved, and it provided operating funds for BART and ferry and AC Transit and the like. There was a seismic surcharge in 2007, and then an Antioch-Dumbarton seismic surcharge in 2010. So that brings us up to today. Last year, the legislature and Governor Brown passed SB 595, which authorized the Bay Area counties to put this on the ballot for voter consideration. It would require a simple majority to pass, would generate potentially, the legislation authorizes up to $3 to be put before the voters on the ballot. MTC, in its role as the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, the Bay Area Transportation Agency, voted, I think a week and a half ago, to go ahead and put that measure before the voters, contingent on all the 9 counties supervisors taking that action. So if that happens, this will be on the ballot for June 2018. The slides here kind of give you an overview of who pays the toll, what do we use the funds for, what would be on the expenditure plan specifically for San Francisco, and some of the features that were included in the legislation. So in the Bay Area, can you guess how many, what percentage of bridge tolls San Franciscans pay? Without looking at a table? It's about 11%, which is about our population share of the region. Most of the bridge tolls in the 7 state-owned bridges, this is all of the bridges, not including Golden Gate Bridge, the 7 state-owned bridges, about 63% are paid by Alameda, Contra Costa, and Solano motorists. Okay? So it's a pretty good deal if you skip ahead and look at the expenditure plan, because a lot of the projects do benefit us here in San Francisco and in the core, but not exclusively. Of course, there were quite a few projects that reflect the priorities of the East Bay. They're the ones who are primarily paying the toll. The San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge accounts for about a third, or 35% of the bridge toll revenues in the region. And again, these are managed by the Bay Area Toll Authority, which is the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. Our representatives are Nick Josefowicz and Jane Kim. And it's a regional body that manages all the regional bridge tolls. By and large, the folks who use the bridge and pay the toll are a higher income than the Bay Area average. So there's a slide in here that shows that average income in all Bay Area households would be 51% are greater than $75,000. But of those paying the bridge toll, it's about 74% are above $75,000.
How do we know that?
That's interesting. They do surveys, and so they have license plates, and they have census data, and they have this sort of data scientists that put that stuff together and get a profile. It's a pretty affluent subset of the Bay Area that pays bridge tolls. So moving along on slide 7, the legislation allowed MTC to make a few decisions, which they did make last month, or this past last week. The timing of the ballot, so it was decided it would be June this year. The toll amount for up to $3. So they showed what would be collected at $1, $2, and $3. And I'll get to that in just a minute. The phase-in schedule, should it all be at once? Should it be over like a phased period over like 10 years? And the specific wording that would appear on the ballot in all 9 counties. There was also an expenditure plan that was included in the legislation last summer that was sort of debated by all of the regional delegates to the legislatures in the Bay Area. They debated and they arm wrestled, and you'll see the expenditure plan. And there's, what else is there? And there's some policy features that were also included to make sure there was accountability and oversight. So the $3, assuming if it is a $3 program, would generate about $4.5 billion for the region over like the next 25, 30 years, which of course could be bonded like the other prior $4. About a third of it is for regional programs and projects. These are things like the Clipper payment, fare payment card that we use, the electronic fare payment card, or carpool lanes, more very regional programs. And then 2/3, 65%, would go to corridor-specific projects in the Bay Bridge corridor, along 101 corridor, the 880 corridor, and the like. So about $4.5 billion, as I said, would be generated. And slide 9 on page 5 of the handout shows the major capital projects. Expansion of the BART cars and the BART fleet to go to 1,000 vehicles is the top priority. That receives about $500 million. Today, BART has about 700 vehicles, and the idea would be to add another 300 to bring that fleet to 1,000. Did you know that in the Bay Bridge corridor, BART actually carries twice the amount of travelers as cars? So it's really not, it's kind of mind-boggling that in the peak period, BART moves 28,000 people in the peak period versus 14,000 or so by car. So the investment in transit, including from prior bridge toll measures, is paying off. So, and it's also important from a resilience standpoint, as we know, to invest in ferries. So David Chu has been really pushing ferry and water transportation. That does receive funding here as well. BART to Silicon Valley is a major priority for the South Bay. South Bay doesn't have a lot of bridges, so they consider 237 like a bridge. And they have a lot of investment for the Silicon Valley, Caltrain and BART and the like, and they're about 22% of the voters. So it was important, and plus the author was Jim Bell, who is the Senate Transportation Committee Chair, and he orchestrated a lot of the negotiations.
Those people are not paying as much because there aren't as many bridge.
They don't travel, right, and yet
they want a whole bunch of money.
They did, and they got more than some people feel was their fair share. BART to San Jose will benefit us, though, of course. A lot of the folks who are traveling up and down 101 or across the Bay Bridge, really would, if they were on BART, we would have, I think, a lot of congestion benefits. So Caltrain Downtown Extension is on the list to bring Caltrain into Transbay Terminal, about $325 million there. Regional express lanes, these are carpool lanes, and in some cases, express lanes meaning the kind that you can pay to get into as a solo driver. And those are on here for about $300 million. The Richmond-San Rafael Bridge, Contra Costa 680 and Highway 4 interchange, which is notoriously congested. Goods movement and mitigation. The Port of Oakland really draws a lot of traffic to, of course, the 880 corridor and 580, so that's in here as well. Safe routes to transit and Bay Trail, so that's important for biking and walking and accessing transit. Solano 80 and 680 interchanges in here. What's not listed on here, but is very important to mention, is vehicles for Muni and facilities as well. BART station improvements, escalators, elevators, station modernization. And on the operating side, we see money in here for ferry service, as well as the regional express bus service plan that was put together to provide for inter-county bus services, and the Transbay Terminal operating funds. So to wrap up, the toll rate options that the MTC considered were $1, $2, or $3. They debated, at what point they would introduce each of these dollars, and they went ahead and approved the first dollar in 2019. The second dollar being implemented in 2023, and a third dollar in 2027. So a phased approach for up to $3 for the voters to consider this June, and that again generates about $4.5 billion. Other important features that were included, an independent oversight committee, an independent office of the BART Inspector General. This was specifically a demand of the East Bay, a lot of East Bay stakeholders who said that we think BART, should be scrutinized in terms of how it uses its funds, this capital versus operating question. There was a lot of debate over that. So an independent office of the BART Inspector General would be created. A 50% discount if you happen to use 2 bridges in your commute. So that's nice for longer commuters. Carpool discount, which is 50%, would remain. So if you're in a carpool, get a bit of a break. Let me see. I think those are the main highlights. There's a link in here for more information. I'm happy to answer questions.